for working families and communities. I ask that you hold Mr. Thompson accountable for his actions.
Elon Musk thought his billions made him untouchable, until Jasmine Crockett's lawyer turned the courtroom into his personal nightmare. That's not clickbait, that's the story. Because when the richest man on the planet threatens to sue a sitting congresswoman, you expect one thing: silence. You expect fear. You expect power to win. But what unfolded that day was the exact opposite. Why did Musk threaten to sue her? Why did this confrontation spread like wildfire across every corner of social media? And what made Crockett's lawyer deliver a response so devastating that Musk himself, the man who builds rockets, buys platforms, and shapes entire industries, was left scrambling for mercy? To understand it, you have to see the stage clearly: Musk stepping forward like a modern Goliath, brandishing his wealth and legal muscle as a weapon. Crockett smaller in stature but larger in resolve, refusing to shrink, refusing to bow. It's David versus Goliath retold in the age of tweets and televised hearings, but with a twist that no one saw coming. The stakes weren't abstract. This wasn't about petty insults or political theater. This was about the clash between unrestrained arrogance and unyielding dignity. A billionaire trying to prove that money could buy silence, and a woman, backed by nothing but the truth and a razor-sharp lawyer, proving that even the mightiest can be humbled when the law speaks louder than wealth. The internet caught fire instantly. Hashtags trended, clips circulated at lightning speed, reactions poured in. She destroyed him without breaking a sweat. The richest man alive just got schooled in real time. And buried inside every post, every comment, was the same question: what exactly did that lawyer say to make Elon Musk's confidence crumble before the world's eyes? Because the power dynamic was supposed to be simple. He had the billions. She had the nerve. But sometimes nerve is the only currency that matters. And here's the truth: Musk walked in expecting obedience. He walked in expecting control. But what he got was a confrontation that flipped the entire script. What her lawyer said next, Musk wasn't ready for it. To grasp the gravity of this showdown, you first have to understand who Elon Musk is in the public imagination. He isn't just another billionaire. He is the man who sells visions of Mars, commands fleets of satellites, and moves financial markets with a single tweet. His empire stretches across Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and X, each project woven into his mythos as the restless genius who bends reality to his will. To many, he embodies the unstoppable force of innovation. To others, he represents unchecked arrogance, a man so accustomed to getting his way that he confuses wealth with wisdom. That arrogance isn't subtle. It shows up in the way he laughs at critics, the way he fires off late-night posts as if the world exists to orbit his thoughts, the way he positions himself as both victim and conqueror in the same breath. He is Goliath in the age of broadband, immense, unyielding, and convinced that no one can lay a hand on him. And across from him stands Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman, yes, but more than that, a former public defender whose sharp tongue and unflinching presence have turned hearings into viral spectacles. She's not polished for comfort, she's forged for combat. She walks into chambers already underestimated, her very voice treated as an intrusion by those who expect her silence. But Crockett doesn't trade in silence. She trades in truth, delivered with a clarity that makes enemies flinch and supporters cheer. When these two worlds collide, the billionaire who thinks he cannot be touched and the congresswoman who refuses to be muted, the sparks are inevitable. And in that collision lies something bigger than personal ego. It is the eternal contest between wealth and accountability, between the illusion of power and the demand for justice. Because Musk isn't just one man, he represents a class of elites who can summon lawyers, lobbyists, and headlines at will. His lawsuit threat was more than paperwork. It was a message to anyone who dared to challenge him: step back or be crushed. But Crockett, in refusing to retreat, became more than herself too. She became a vessel for the ordinary citizen who's been told to stay quiet, for the worker silenced by corporations, for the voter dismissed by billionaires who believe their money makes them sovereign. In her defiance, she embodied something that wealth cannot purchase: dignity. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a test of dignity itself. Every headline could have carried that sentence, because it distilled the truth. Could dignity hold its ground against dollars? Could the fire of conviction withstand the cold steel of money? The world was watching because the question wasn't abstract. It was visceral. Everyone has faced a moment where they were told they were too small, too weak, too powerless. Everyone knows what it feels like to be cornered by someone who assumes superiority is permanent. Watching Crockett face Musk was more than politics. It was vindication. The clash ahead wasn't about contracts or filings. It was about whether arrogance could finally be humbled. Musk had the empire, the influence, the arrogance. But Crockett carried something that has outlasted every empire, the courage to look power in the eye and say, "You will not silence me." And as the stage set itself, the stakes sharpened. This wasn't just courtroom theater. This was a test of dignity, of principle, of whether truth could still cut through the noise. Elon Musk did not stumble into fortune. He engineered an empire so sprawling that it now feels woven into the fabric of modern life. Cars that drive themselves, rockets that pierce the sky, satellites that blanket the earth and internet. He casts himself as the dreamer, the restless innovator. But beneath the mythology lies something darker. A man who has learned that silence can be bought, critics can be crushed, and rules bend when wealth is infinite. His controversies are legend. The late-night storms on Twitter, Nox, where insults fly like sparks from a bonfire, the sudden bans on journalists who dared to report unflattering truths, the lawsuits threatened against whistleblowers who spoke out of turn. Musk often paints himself as the rebel underdog, the maverick battling bureaucrats and naysayers. Yet the irony is unavoidable. He is not the underdog. He is the overlord, armed with billions, wielding influence so vast it can topple markets with a single word. And with that power comes a pattern. When challenged, he doesn't retreat. He escalates. He weaponizes the tools at his disposal, turning wealth into a shield, lawyers into swords. The arrogance grows louder each time it works, each time another critic fades into silence. But history whispers a warning. Arrogance always collapses. Goliath always falls. No empire, no matter how dazzling, survives untouched when hubris becomes its cornerstone. Musk has built his world on the belief that no one can truly resist him. Yet in every story where power grows unchecked, a reckoning waits. And as this confrontation with Jasmine Crockett loomed, that reckoning began to stir. The cracks were invisible at first, but they were there. Musk's own overconfidence was already writing the prelude to his downfall. Jasmine Crockett's story does not begin with privilege, but with grit. Before she ever stepped into the halls of Congress, she was a lawyer fighting for those who had no voice. Clients forgotten by the system, citizens too poor to buy influence, the kind of cases where justice is a gamble and dignity is the only currency. That crucible sharpened her, taught her that silence serves the powerful and defiance is the only defense for the powerless. When she rose to Congress, she carried that same fire. She did not trade her edge for decorum. She did not sand down her sharpness to fit the mold. Instead, she became known for fearless clapbacks that cut through pomp and hypocrisy with surgical precision. Clips of her speaking truth to colleagues and challengers went viral, not because she sought the spotlight, but because the spotlight could not ignore her. She is not the polished politician groomed for cameras. She is the outsider who barged into rooms where she was never meant to belong, her very presence a reminder that the people sent her, not the elites. That makes her relatable not because she is flawless, but because she is stubbornly human, fiery, imperfect, unyielding. The stakes whenever she speaks are never just her own. She carries a collective weight, the sense that her defense of herself is, in truth, a defense of everyone who has been dismissed, underestimated, or silenced. And history shows a pattern: those who underestimate her always regret it. Every sneer, every attempt to belittle her has ended the same way, with Crockett standing taller and her challenger diminished. So when Elon Musk set his sights on her, he wasn't just picking a fight with Jasmine Crockett. He was stepping into a storm that has swallowed bigger men before. The moment Elon Musk's threat broke, it spread like a lightning strike across the political landscape. A lawsuit against a sitting Congresswoman, the richest man alive, turning his legal arsenal against Jasmine Crockett. At first, it felt like intimidation in its purest form, a billionaire flexing not with fists, but with paperwork sharp enough to cut reputations to shreds. The leak came quickly. Musk's legal team, armed with a strategy as cold as steel. Their language dripped with the smug confidence of men who had argued for power all their lives. They framed Crockett as a defamer, claiming her words had injured Musk's standing, as if his empire of rockets and cars could collapse under the weight of a single Congresswoman's truth. The documents reeked of gaslighting, twisting Crockett's critiques into malicious lies, recasting her questions as slander, her defiance as an unlawful attack. It was not law, it was theater designed to frighten, to silence, to remind her of her place. For a flicker of time it worked. Crockett's inner circle whispered, "This could ruin you." The air thickened with uncertainty. Even she felt the sting of it. A billionaire pointing the full weight of his empire in her direction was no small thing. In that first instant, the room around her seemed to tilt. This wasn't a Twitter spat. This was a coordinated strike. And yes, For a moment, it looked like Musk might crush her. But then, Crockett steadied herself. She leaned on the resilience forged in courtrooms long before cameras knew her name. She had faced systems more ruthless than one man's ego. And unlike Musk, who lived cocooned in adoration and wealth, she knew what it meant to fight when the odds were impossible. Her composure held. She spoke carefully, without flinching, letting her stillness become the counterpunch to Musk's spectacle. The public saw it, and the public reacted. Headlines lit up. Musk threatens Congresswoman in stunning power play. Commentators pounced. Is this the richest man alive or just the most fragile? Social media ignited with fury. Twitter threads unraveled the absurdity. Hay calls himself a free speech absolutist, yet sues the first person who speaks truth about him. Memes appeared within hours, mocking Musk's supposed invincibility, casting him not as Goliath but as a child throwing tantrums in a courtroom. The emotional tide rose with every post, every share. People recognized the arrogance instantly. They saw in Musk's threat the same dynamic that haunts workplaces, neighborhoods, entire nations, the powerful crushing dissent simply because they can. The anger was not abstract, it was personal. Viewers felt their own scars reopen, moments when they had been silenced by someone bigger, richer, louder. Musk became the avatar of that arrogance, and Crockett became the stand-in for everyone who had ever said, "No, you won't shut me up." Television pundits couldn't resist. Some framed it as cowardice, a titan so thin-skinned he trembles at words. Others as hypocrisy. The man who boasts of free speech threatens lawsuits at the first sign of criticism. But the narrative crystallized into one unshakable perception. Musk was not strong in this moment. He was scared, and fear, once revealed, changes everything. The spectacle of the lawsuit was meant to intimidate, to end Crockett's momentum before it began. Instead, it handed her the spotlight. The contrast became cinematic. Musk's lawyers in tailored suits, drafting threats in skyscrapers, Crockett calm, steady, refusing to bow. The public roaring in the background, hungry for justice. It was the oldest story retold, with new actors, a billionaire attempting to crush a woman who dared to speak, only to discover that arrogance is never invincible. And though the battle had barely begun, the energy had shifted. Musk wanted her silence. What he created was a storm. When Jasmine Crockett's lawyer entered the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted. Not with theatrics or noise, but with a calm so sharp it cut deeper than rage ever could. He didn't arrive with bluster. He arrived with precision, the kind of stillness that makes even the most confident adversary uneasy. Musk had walked in expecting panic, expecting tears, expecting the frailty of someone outmatched. What he saw instead was a man adjusting his glasses, flipping open a folder, and preparing to dismantle the richest man alive one sentence at a time. The opening was disarming, a measured tone, almost conversational, yet every word chosen like a scalpel. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is not about injury. It is about intimidation." The line landed with weight. The courtroom leaned forward. Musk shifted in his seat. Then came the architecture of the counter-argument, built brick by brick. The lawyer invoked the Constitution itself, citing protections that have defended critics of power for centuries. He referenced landmark precedents, from New York Times v. Sullivan to Hustler v. Falwell, cases that enshrined the principle that public figures cannot simply sue their way out of scrutiny. Every precedent became a hammer blow, each citation a reminder that Musk's lawsuit was less about law and more about silencing. The knife twisted with irony. Musk, the self-declared champion of free speech, had built his brand on the cry of open expression. Yet here he was, dragging a public servant into court for speaking the truth. The lawyer didn't need to embellish. He simply read Musk's own words back to him, tweets where Musk proclaimed, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant," and "I defend speech I hate, because that's freedom." Then, pausing, he let the silence hang. The hypocrisy spoke louder than any insult. Musk's face betrayed it. The twitch of an eye, the tightening of a jaw. The billionaire who smirked at rockets exploding on launch pads now found no humor in the explosion of his own contradictions. And then came the humor, delivered with surgical restraint. "Risser. Musk," the lawyer said, "appears to believe criticism is a violation of his civil rights. If that were true, we'd have to expand the court to hold every late-night comedian in America." The gallery broke into muffled laughter. Even the judge fought to maintain composure. Musk's glare hardened, but he could not erase the sting. The rhythm built like a symphony, every movement designed to escalate. Musk's legal filings, torn apart. The claims of defamation, exposed as hollow. No evidence beyond bruised ego. The argument that Crockett's words caused material harm. Reduced to dust with financial reports showing Tesla stock stable, SpaceX contracts intact, and X still hemorrhaging users for reasons unrelated to Congress. Every point Musk raised was dismantled, one by one like a fortress crumbling under siege. The lawyer's tone never broke. Calm, sharp, devastating. At moments it was almost playful, roasting Musk with the kind of dry wit that makes humiliation sting longer. If the standard for defamation is disagreement, he quipped, then Mr. Musk may want to prepare for a very crowded docket. The courtroom chuckled again, and Musk's empire of intimidation seemed smaller with every passing minute. The crowd reaction became its own chorus. Reporters scribbled furiously. Spectators whispered, "This is courtroom poetry." Each turn of phrase was clipped and replayed online within hours. Hashtags exploded. Fen Musk meltdown, Fay lawyered. The clips went viral not because of volume, but because of clarity. The lawyer was writing history in real time, and the world recognized it. The humiliation was not in shouting or theatrics. It was in exposure. Musk's contradictions laid bare, his hypocrisy turned inside out, his legal arguments stripped of dignity until only insecurity remained. Each sentence left him smaller. Each pause left him cornered. And then the crescendo. The lawyer leaned forward, voice steady but sharpened like the final stroke of a blade. "This nation," he said, "has endured figures far wealthier, far more powerful than Mr. Musk. And every one of them learned the same truth: money is not a shield against accountability. Mr. Musk came here with threats. He will leave here with regrets." The repetition rang out like a verdict. He came with threats. He left with regrets. The words echoed in the chamber, not shouted, but imprinted. The kind of line destined to live forever in headlines, in tweets, in late-night monologues. Musk, who had walked into court a colossus, now sat as a man cornered. His empire intact but his aura fractured, his billions meaningless in the face of a truth spoken with precision and poise. By the end, there was no doubt. The richest man alive, the one who had threatened to sue with all the arrogance of invincibility, was left begging. Not for victory, but for an exit. The lawyer closed his folder, calm as he began. No need for triumph, no gloating. The work was done. The empire had been humbled, the mask cracked, the facade peeled away, and as Crockett sat silently watching, her lawyer's words echoing through the chamber, one truth rose above all others: arrogance had finally met its match. The laughter that rippled through the courtroom after Musk's contradictions were exposed carried a strange energy. It wasn't cruel laughter, not mockery for its own sake. It was the sound of disbelief, of tension breaking. But the lawyer wasn't finished. He let the room breathe for a moment, then pivoted with surgical precision, pulling the atmosphere from humor into something colder, sharper. "This," he said, voice resonant now, "isn't about hurt feelings. This isn't about reputation. This is about democracy." The words landed like a hammer. The gallery stilled. Even those chuckling seconds before straightened in their seats. Musk, who had tried to cloak his lawsuit in the language of injury, now found himself standing in the middle of an ideological battlefield. He had built his defense on the idea of free speech, painting himself as its champion. Yet here he was suing a Congresswoman, a representative chosen by the people, for exercising the very principle he claimed to protect. The irony stung more than any insult. Musk, who preached absolute freedom online, was revealed as someone who could not tolerate dissent in real life. The lawyer reframed everything with a clarity that pierced straight through the spectacle. If wealth can silence elected voices, then what remains of representation? If a billionaire's discomfort becomes grounds for lawsuits, then what remains of accountability? His words stripped away the pretense. This was no longer about Musk versus Crockett. It was wealth versus democracy, intimidation versus freedom, fear versus truth. The emotional shift was stark. The earlier chuckles dissolved into a silence heavy with gravity. What had started as entertainment, the spectacle of the richest man alive being roasted in court, had transformed into a moral reckoning. People weren't just laughing anymore. They were thinking, weighing, reckoning with what this moment meant for everyone beyond the walls of the chamber. And outside those walls, the ripple effect was already exploding. Social media feeds filled with clips of the lawyer's calm dismantling. "This isn't about reputation, it's about democracy," became a rallying cry, quoted in captions, stitched into videos amplified across every platform. Hashtags trended: Musk humiliated, pay Crockett strong, a democracy defends itself. Late-night hosts seized on the irony. The so-called free speech absolutist silencing the one voice that refused to bow. Memes painted Musk not as the visionary innovator, but as a fragile bully, undone by his own contradictions. Cartoons showed him in a rocket, not blasting into space, but ejecting out of court. Commentators replayed the footage on loop, marveling at how easily his empire of power crumbled under a few pages of precedent and a lawyer who refused to flinch. For Musk, the humiliation was more than personal. His entire persona, the maverick who could outthink, outbuild, and outlast anyone, was punctured. The man who prided himself on disruption was now disrupted. The man who claimed to break boundaries was exposed as someone desperate to enforce them. The irony was undeniable. Musk, the innovator who reached for the stars, was reduced to a man who could not withstand words. And Crockett, the Congresswoman often dismissed as too loud, too brash, too much, became the embodiment of something enduring. A reminder that democracy isn't fragile when defended with courage. The moral whiplash was complete. What began as laughter ended in chills. The courtroom had become a stage not just for a lawsuit, but for a revelation. Wealth without principle collapses, and arrogance always writes its own downfall. In the days that followed, the thunderous spectacle of Elon Musk's threatened lawsuit began to unravel with quiet, almost embarrassed retreat. The billionaire who had entered the fray with fire and fury now slipped into silence. His legal team, once eager to flex their muscle, offered no new filings, no press conferences, no grand defense. The lawsuit, once painted as a storm, dissolved into mist. Musk's threat had fizzled. It wasn't announced with fanfare. No headlines declared case dismissed in bold type. Instead, the world simply noticed that nothing happened. No hearings, no motions, no continuation. The billionaire's silence was louder than any courtroom battle could have been. It was the silence of surrender. For Jasmine Crockett, the effect was seismic. The woman once mocked for her sharp tongue now stood taller than ever. Colleagues in Congress spoke her name with new respect. Commentators who once treated her as a viral clip began to call her something else: a defender, a fighter, a voice that would not bend. But the victory wasn't only hers. It belonged to everyone who watched and felt the tremor of possibility. Every tweet, every late-night joke, every clip replayed carried the same message. Arrogance can be humbled. Wealth is not invincible. Even the most powerful empire can stumble when confronted by truth spoken without fear. Crockett herself, in a rare moment of reflection, put it best. "This wasn't just my fight," she said softly, standing before a cluster of microphones that suddenly seemed small compared to the magnitude of her words. "It was proof that power without principle is powerless." The phrase caught like wildfire. It wasn't the roar of mockery this time, but the steady chant of affirmation. People repeated it at rallies, posted it in comment threads, carried it like a shield. It became a line of defense for anyone who had ever felt small in the shadow of something too big to fight. The emotional catharsis was undeniable. Musk, the Goliath who strutted into the arena, left diminished, not by wealth lost or business shaken, but by the collapse of an illusion. Dignity had triumphed where arrogance had faltered, and in that triumph was hope. Hope that the voices often drowned out, the ones laughed at, underestimated, dismissed, could rise against even the loudest giants. Hope that democracy, though bruised and battered, still had defenders willing to stand unflinching when the stakes demanded it. The story closed not on the image of a billionaire retreating, but on something far more enduring: the reminder that ordinary voices, when spoken with courage, can topple even the most unshakable towers of power. Elon Musk entered this story threatening to sue, certain his billions could bend the world to his will. But when the dust settled, it wasn't Crockett on the defensive. It was Musk forced into silence, retreating from a courtroom that had become his personal nightmare. He came with threats. He left with regrets. Some even said he was begging for mercy. And that's the heart of it. If you were sitting in that room, watching the richest man alive buckle under the weight of his own arrogance, whose side would you have taken? Millions online already answered. Viral clips showed Crockett's lawyer dismantling Musk point by point, while comments poured in. She bodied him without breaking a sweat. Hashtags trended, memes flourished. What began as a lawsuit turned into one of the coldest clapbacks of the year. Now it's your turn. Drop your reaction below. Was this truly the moment arrogance finally collapsed under truth? And don't forget to subscribe if you believe that no billionaire, no matter how powerful, can outlast courage spoken plainly. Because if Musk couldn't win this fight, who's the next Goliath about to fall?